So is that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, can't deny that view.
2013 has ended, but before I can move on to the games on the horizon, I feel the need to get some closure on a certain game. The Last of Us. This is a game that's been universally praised, garnering countless perfect scores in Game of the Year awards. Even I made a video praising the game when it was first shown off at E3 2012. This was a game I was extremely excited to play, but sadly it ended up being one of the most disappointing experiences I had all year. Now, hear me out. The Last of Us is far from a bad game, and there were far worse games released in 2013. But I didn't expect games like DMC Devil May Cry or Bioshock Infinite to be good, so it wasn't a surprise when they ended up being bad. The Last of Us was such a disappointment because I did expect it to be good. I was captivated by the scenarios and mechanics presented in the original E3 demo, but the final game didn't deliver on what was shown at all. This disappointment didn't come from overhyping the game or having unrealistic expectations. What I expected was what they showed us, and what they showed us just isn't what we got. This really isn't an opinion either. It's a fact that many of the things shown off in the E3 and extended PAX demos just aren't possible in the full game. So it isn't unreasonable for me to be surprised and disappointed when these things weren't in the actual game less than a year later. Various changes like the removal of picking up ammo in real time, the ability to crouch run and perform a camera lean to see around corners, are things I'm sad to see removed, but they don't actually affect the game that much to hurt the overall experience. The most egregious changes come from the enemy AI. This is no longer a game of shifting powers and interacting with AI that thinks and responds to what you show them and how the battle plays out. And while it didn't experience as much of a downgrade as a game like Bioshock Infinite did, this is still enough to change the very nature of the game. The balance of power AI system, which was talked about in interviews when the game was first shown, appears to be non-existent in the full game. The weapon you brandish was supposed to have an effect on how enemies took you on, and their behavior would change based on which side had the upper hand in battle. Things like the number of allies the enemies had were supposed to play a role in this. A perfect example of the balance of power system in the E3 demo would be this segment where an enemy with a pipe waits to ambush the player on the other side of a doorway. It makes perfect sense that an enemy with a melee weapon would hide and try to get the drop on someone with a gun, but in the actual game, enemies with melee weapons are only capable of running at you in a straight line with no reaction to you pointing a gun straight at their face. If you're at a window, they'll all come jumping through. Enemies react the same way no matter what the situation is. It seems like enemy type dictates how enemies act more than anything, when before, enemies were supposed to have a human element to them. They weren't supposed to be armored guy and Molotov guy. They were supposed to be humans trying to survive just as much as you. We saw this system in the original demos, so why isn't it in the final game? Many other games have had systems in place where enemies react to your weapon and their allies falling. Even a brawler like Yakuza 3 has more of a balance of power system than The Last of Us. Enemies react to your weapons in fear and get especially scared when you take out their friends. The game even lets you take advantage of these moments with finishing moves specifically for scared enemies. If this game could do it, why couldn't The Last of Us? With their current AI, the enemies act almost exactly like enemies in Uncharted. Melee enemies run at you and try to hit you, and enemies with guns take cover and shoot you, but try to punch you when you get too close. The AI doesn't get any better with higher difficulties either. Nearly all of the footage in this video is from Survivor difficulty, the highest difficulty in the game. The enemies only react when you try to shoot when you have no ammo, and when you try to hold up one of their allies. Even then, they don't react intelligently to these situations at all, but at least it's something. In the demo, the enemies were capable of so much more than this. We already talked about the ability to ambush you, but enemies also ran when aimed at, like a normal person would. There's an entire segment of the extended PAX demo where the player chases down the last enemy in an area who's trying to flee. The enemy hides and attacks when the moment is right. Nothing like this ever happens in the actual game. Now when you aim at an enemy, the only thing they do is this awkward looking dodge to the side slightly. Even when they know you're out of bullets, they'll still dodge. So at this point you can throw any notion that enemies respond accurately to what you show them out the window. Enemies can no longer run up beside you, grab your gun, and restrain you for their allies to shoot. I was really impressed by this moment, not only by the teamwork on display, but because it's so obvious that an enemy would try to grab your gun if they had the chance. Joel even switches to restrain them in a way that isn't present in the final game. Other than that, enemies have tiny fields of vision, poor hearing, and extremely short-term memory. You don't need to tread softly to sneak around these guys. You can literally run at them from across the room and they won't pick up on you until you've already initiated a melee takedown. If you want to see how bad their vision is, just take a look at this. If you're having a shootout with some enemies, you can just sit there for a few seconds and they'll forget where you are and come to investigate. In fact, if you're in the middle of a shootout, you can just throw a bottle or brick and enemies will come running out into the open to investigate it and completely forget about you. Sometimes even Ellie will cause this to happen accidentally when she tries to throw something at an enemy. This even happens when you use a bow. The bow is a silent weapon and its arrows are treated the same way a bottle or brick is if you miss your target. So, if you decide to use the bow in combat, your stray arrows will constantly draw the attention of enemies away from you. Just look at this. My first arrow pulls one enemy out of the battle. And then my second arrow pulls another enemy out of the battle. Like I said, this is all on the highest difficulty. Are you seeing my problem? This game was touted by the developers as having this really interesting and dynamic AI, but in the actual game, it's like you're fighting against a bunch of brain-dead morons. I mean, come on, this is how they react to having a bomb thrown at them.
5 just this week. Hey. Goddamn!
The AI in general is incapable of seeing Ellie. I get why they did this. It would probably annoy a lot of people if this AI character got them caught, but it really pulls you out of the experience when she's just out in the open and bumping into enemies. Actually, all AI-controlled characters in this game have terrible pathfinding. Not only is the AI in the game just weird, it's also really glitchy at times. On multiple occasions, I've had enemies just lock up for no reason. An enemy attacks me from behind and then just stops. It completely kills the mood every time this happens. The enemies with the worst AI have to be the guys with Molotov cocktails. This isn't even a glitch, this is just how these guys act no matter what. They're the only guys programmed to always run away from you, and half the time when they try to throw their Molotov cocktail, it just disappears in their hand.
Heads up! Here it comes! Heads up!
A week or so before the release of The Last of Us, a few members of Naughty Dog did a Q&A session on Reddit. Here's what one user asked. The E3 demo showcased incredibly complex and dynamic AI. They had self-preservation, they reacted verbally and realistically to hostages and empty guns, they ran away in fear and hid and ambushed, they worked together and communicated in a jaw-droppingly flawless manner. It's what sold me on the game. Has this been maintained in the full game or altered or changed in any way? Max Diekoff, an AI programmer at Naughty Dog, responded saying, "It has been improved since the E3 demo. All of what you mentioned is still in the game, and more. It is emergent gameplay, so it won't be the same every time you play through. And they do fantastic things that even I, who wrote the AI, couldn't have predicted." Really, I was pretty stunned to see Max Diekoff claim that the AI in the game is not only as good as what we saw in the E3 demo, but better. I was actually able to get in contact with him through Twitter. Unfortunately, he stopped responding once I asked if he could tell me about the removed enemy abilities that I mentioned before. So, why did the final game turn out like this? Honestly, I still don't have an answer. It's possible that Naughty Dog just couldn't get the AI to work the way they wanted it to before the release of the game, so they had to scrap a lot of the more ambitious aspects of it. It's also possible that the demos were just a series of carefully crafted scripted events. Maybe this AI was never actually part of the game and Naughty Dog was just being dishonest about it in an attempt to make the game look better. I don't know if that's really the case because Uncharted 2 and 3 both had E3 demos that accurately represented their full games. There are definitely parts that look scripted, but I don't think all of it was. And I'm gonna have faith in Naughty Dog and assume that they weren't just lying to our faces when they talked about the AI in interviews. You can think whatever you want based on what I've shown you, but we'll never really know unless someone at Naughty Dog wants to spill the beans. In closing, I think it's really unfortunate that we need to be so apprehensive about the stage demos we see of games. Now, anytime I see an impressive contextual animation or something like that, I'm gonna have a hard time believing it's gonna be in the final game. Anyway, The Last of Us is still an enjoyable game to play, especially the multiplayer surprisingly, and it is possible to get some memorable moments out of the AI that is in the game, just like you could in Uncharted. I've wanted to make this video for a long time now, and I'm glad I could finally get it off my chest, though I doubt many people will care about what I have to say, when most of the praise surrounding the game stems from its narrative. I was never really interested in the narrative of the game itself, but the scenarios that it could put you in with the AI we saw in the demos. Unfortunately, Naughty Dog wasn't able to deliver in that regard.